The Assassin's Creed modern-day plot is one of the most confusing elements of Assassin's Creed, and now that it seems to be coming to its inevitable conclusion, even if there is no finite answer, I thought maybe we should talk about all the stuff considered modern-day times for Assassin's Creed. So here's a full rundown of the stories and where you can find them that are all incorporated into the modern day. Now, during the 20th century, a shift in both Assassin and Templar order began to occur. The Templars really started to gain the upper hand by this point, but their first victory was at the start of the 1900s. In 1908, Nikolai Orlov and a team of assassins stormed the Templar facility in Tunguska in search of the Staff of Eden. I covered this in more detail in our video, The Fall, but to sum it up, Nikolai was the only survivor of the operation after the facility and the staff blew up. He ended up getting a shard from the destroyed staff later from Grigory Rasputin's grave, and he planned to leave the country. Instead, he decided to take one last mission, bringing him in contact with the precursor box. This is the same box that made its way from Ezio to Xiaojun in Assassin's Creed Embers, and eventually made its way to the likes of Benjamin Franklin. The box then traveled a long way to get to Russia, ending up in the hands of the Grand Duchess Anastasia, after the Templars killed everyone else in the royal family at the time. When the two met, she started to act like Xiaojun, a bleeding effect caused by the reaction of the shard in the box being close to one another. They escaped by train and went to the assassins for help. But Nikolai learned that they wanted nothing more than to run experiments on Anastasia. They were going to kill her in an attempt to extract Xiaojun's memories. He saved her life, leaving the box behind, and gave her a new identity to flee Germany. This is when the past events of the chain happen, and Nikolai fled to the United States after abandoning the Brotherhood due to their actions. The box itself would then end up in the hands of the Templars following these events, who were only gaining more of an upper hand at this point. This actually brings us to World War I, with the Templars installing a spy ring in London. This was led by the Master Spy, a person who inherited the memories of the Isu Aida, basically a sage. The Templars took a big hit during this time when Lydia Fry, the very last assassin in the city, killed him and his followers. As time moved on, the Templars then gave Hitler an Apple of Eden in an attempt to damage Europe as much as possible. This was orchestrated in a way to give rise to capitalism, giving more control of the populace to the corporations. This is how Abstergo Industries, the front of the Templar organization, started in 1937. At the same time, experiments with both Assassins and Templars were trying to change the past of Die Glock, German for the bell. This was the prototype of the Animus, and it was being used by both groups to see into the past through experiments using ancestors' eyes. By 1944, Abstergo Industries recovered the original Shroud of Eden and took a piece of Eden from the assassin Miriam Kurtz after she put in the work of finding it in the first place. Hitler, meanwhile, was killed by the assassins in 1945, but the apple that he had, it was never found. At this point, more and more Templar victories began to stack up, and this brings us to the 21st century. This is when Daniel Cross joined the Assassins as a Templar sleeper agent, and he murdered his mentor under the instruction of Dr. Warren Vidic. This is covered in the modern day part of the Chain video we did here at the channel. The Great Purge at this point was well on its way. The Assassins were thinning out year after year. 2006, we saw the first mention of the group Eurito, after they falsified reports of a virus in Africa. This brings us just before the events of the very first Assassin's Creed title. In 2010, Abstergo attempted to kidnap Sean Hastings after he exposed them to WikiLeaks. This was his introduction to the Assassins, as Rebecca Crane freed him before Abstergo could interrogate him. The Assassins were only just discovering the Animus Project at this point. They sent Clay to infiltrate the company's HQ and access their files from the CEO's computer. After finding out about the location of their facility in Italy, the Assassins decided to make him a mole. In 2011, Clay was captured by Abstergo's Lineage Discovery and Acquisition team and became Subject 16, being forced to relive his ancestors' memories by Warren Vidic. The plan was to figure out what the Assassins were after and eventually escape with Lucy, but things didn't go as planned. After Clay found out about the Abstergo satellite, he decided to plan his own escape, but after being advised by Juno, the ancient Isu who was basically implanting her memories and personality within all kinds of stuff, he knew how it would go. So he revealed that Lucy was a Templar, working with Vidic, and Clay was suffering from the bleeding effect too badly. Rather than continue to be used by the Templars, he decided to leave messages for the person who would eventually take his place. He created an AI version of himself in the Animus and then painted messages and the last of his blood for the next person in line to uncover. This brings us to 2012 in the events of the first game. In a world where the last film studio was shut down, the storms on the east coast of the US were rampant, and Abstergo was under investigation for manipulating an entire town's water supply to test their drug, new fluoride. The Templars were then using their Sigma team to track down every assassin that had survived the Great Purge, with nearly every assassin having been wiped out at this time. Abstergo had until December 21st to launch their satellite, but the piece of Eden that they had wanted to use to power it had been destroyed. Through Desmond Miles, they planned to discover more to power the Eye. Reliving Altair's memories, Abstergo got their map to roughly show where the pieces of Eden were. But Desmond escaped the facility thanks to Lucy's help before they could get more information. This was actually all a part of the plan set in place by Lucy and Warren Vidic, allowing Desmond to trust Lucy more and record more memories within the Animus in a location he actually felt safer in. In the second game, we discover that Lucy and Desmond are going to meet up with Sean and Rebecca and use Animus 2.0, giving them more information on the pieces of Eden as well as training Desmond through the bleeding effect. Through Ezio's memories, he learns of the great catastrophe from Minerva, a disaster that destroyed most of the planet that can be prevented from happening again if the pieces of Eden are brought to the temples made by the first civilization. Their base of operations was then discovered, and they kept having to run away from the Templars, bringing us to the Brotherhood. At this point, Lucy stashed recordings of Desmond's time in the Animus in their new base, Ezio's home from when he was a kid. But her and the Templars' plans to betray them were doomed to fail. Through Ezio's memories, the assassins found the Apple of Eden, but when Desmond actually touched it, he was possessed by Juno, still looking for a way to be reborn in the modern age. Juno, controlling Desmond, then killed Lucy. After losing consciousness, a team of assassins led by Warren Miles, who was actually Desmond Miles' father, put him into the Animus. This led to finding the vault within Ezio's memories, giving them the ability to find the Grand Temple. Unfortunately for Desmond, he ended up slipping into a coma, and the events of Revelations would have him put himself back together. He eventually fully synchronized with Ezio's memories and entered into a sync nexus thanks to Clay, stopping the bleeding effect from corrupting his mind. He woke up before they reached the Grand Temple, but he and the assassins would need a key to get into it. Bringing us to the events of Assassin's Creed 3, where Desmond goes through Hatham and eventually Connor's memories to find an amulet that would open the temple. The rest of the area needed several power cores in order for it to fully function. This led Desmond to use his assassin training in action to steal them. This is when he finally came face to face with Daniel Cross during his heist, eluding him twice, but being forced to confront him and the other Templars before they kidnapped his father. They offered a trade, the apple for William Miles. But Desmond ended up killing Daniel Cross and using the apple to force the guards to kill Warren Vidic, and then themselves. After saving his father and acquiring the power sources for the temple, he would continue to search for the amulet in Connor's memories, finally finding where he kept it. They found the key and they opened the temple, with Juno then appearing, telling Desmond to touch the orb inside to prevent the second disaster from occurring. At that moment, Minerva appeared to him and told him that he had been lied to. Juno's original goal was to conquer the world, and she has been imprisoned ever since, reaching out through various means to try and reach her goal. If Desmond followed her orders, the world would be saved, but Juno would be freed, and Desmond would have to die. By this point, there would be mere hours before the disaster was going to happen, and he had to make a decision to sacrifice himself, believing that the assassins would stop Juno. He saved the world, but there was still much to do. His body was recovered by the Templars after his sacrifice, and Abstergo Industries would start the next phase of their plan. Following the events of Assassin's Creed 3, Miles stepped down as the head of the Brotherhood and gave it, as well as a book on everything that he knew about the Order, to Gavin Banks, trusting him to rebuild everything. In 2013, Abstergo Industries started to sell the Animus as a game console to the public, and the assassins were investigating Abstergo Entertainment and their new products. Rebecca would help make the Hephaestus email network and would accompany Sean back to the US after Gavin found some clues in the book. They found the farm, the place that Desmond and some other assassins grew up, completely destroyed, in a magazine article claiming that the Tunguska explosion was caused by the assassins. Abstergo Entertainment then started to hire more people in Montreal, leading Rebecca and Sean to investigate. While this was happening, Gavin and his team, Susan Drayton and Eric Cooper, tried to figure out what happened to the informant that they had in Osaka, Japan. Gavin then brought guns from the Philippines in preparations, while Rebecca informed him that they had a mole inside of Abstergo. Now we're covering the events of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, or should I say, Devils of the Caribbean. The CCO, Olivier, hired a new person to oversee Sample 17's project, an analysis of Desmond's body to gain access to his memories for films and games. Through Abstergo Industries, however, their aim was to locate more pieces of Eden. The new analyst would end up being caught in the crossfire of all of this information being gathered by John Standish, who acted as a mole, hacker, barista, and courier. Olivier would then disappear on the way to a meeting, and so would many of their personal files as they were hacked. Abstergo would then put many employees inside of the building into the basement until they could figure out what was happening. John Standish led the analysts out of their cell and had them activate a program to make Juno, now in the digital network, possess them. The goal here was to give Juno a new body. Juno wasn't strong enough to have a physical host, however, and John decided to poison the analyst so that they'd be weak enough to control, even going as far to reveal himself as a sage. He was the reincarnation of Ida, Juno's husband, after all. But before he could get his wife's consciousness into the analyst, a security team of Abstergo interrupted and killed him. They then kept the body, and with it, they attempted to find more sages. In addition to this, a special vial of blood was found inside of the facility. The vial would end up in the hands of the initiates, something that I covered in our video on Lost Media. This would then bring us to Assassin's Creed Brahmin, where the November release of Brahmin VR launched in India in an attempt to gain access to the memories of Arbaz and Piara. Abstergo planned to upload the memories of those who used the headset into the cloud database and find Koh-i-Noor, a piece of Eden that could potentially track other pieces. The story revolves around Jat Sora, and we cover it more in detail in another video, but he's basically lost everything. He had run-ins with both the Assassins and the Templars, resulting in him having to dig through his dead fiance's memories to find the piece of Eden. In those memories, Jat found out about the Koh-i-Noor diamond, and is capable of binding all of the pieces of Eden into one, but can only be used by women. In Arbaz's memories, the goddess Durga possessed Piara and told Jat directly through time that the Templars and Assassins need to band together to stop Juno. That December, Gavin would continue his search in Japan while the initiates were continuing to leak information. One was even a spy aboard his own ship that he had been using as a base of operations. In Osaka, Gavin found that this informant had been killed by the Yakuza, and upon further investigation, discovered that one particular branch had been wiped out entirely. Despite their clan members being dead, the branch was still apparently operating the companies that they were in charge of. Gavin and another Brotherhood member, Emmanuel, searched for the leader, and they ended up in a fight with one of their guards before discovering that he had a hidden blade. They all confirmed their identities as assassins, so Gavin and Manny were escorted to the leader, Seiko. She revealed that she had taken over the Osaka Brotherhood after the Yakuza had killed her husband and was trying to keep up the war against them and Abstergo. By taking over the gang that killed him, she was able to hide the assassins in the city by posing as Yakuza members. Gavin gave the guns to Seiko and his dealer's contact information, since Japanese gun laws kept weapons out of the assassins' hands, but not Abstergo's. He kept cracking the codes that William Miles had left for him in his book, and he moved on to Russia. In February of 2014, Gavin and his team then met up with Galina, a Russian assassin that wanted to help in cleaning up a terrible accident. Her mother was doing research with an animus of her creation and ended up forcing several assassins into it. As a result, they were all driven insane from the bleeding effect, and the mother had convinced herself that she was Eve, the leader of the human rebellion during the first generation of humans. The only odd thing was that she was claiming all of this while her body was still in the animus, something that should be impossible. Gavin's team then helped Galina and cleared out the lab, but when they got to her mother, she kept talking about Adam and the Grey. Juno watched it through the computer screens, and when the mother was killed, she screamed through the screen and disappeared. The Russian Brotherhood was then dead, and Galena joined Gavin for their next destination. In the same month, the Assassins managed to steal the precursor box, while the Templars gave up on the search for the Ankh of Isis, thinking the piece of Eden was just a wild goose chase. Instead, they were searching for the observatory, knowing that this was intentionally buried by the Assassins 200 years prior. By April, Gavin met up with William, Rebecca, and Sean at last, and they argued at first, but it stopped once they discovered Gavin's ship had a spy. Gavin was all in favor of killing the traitor, but William stepped in with the idea that they could work alongside the initiates instead. Sean was in charge of recruiting and training the group alongside Bishop, retaining the information that they had procured. During the events of Rogue, Unity, and Syndicate, Sean and Galena had destroyed the Phoenix Project lab in Paris, which was Abstergo's plan to locate other sages or even clone them with Isu DNA after they recovered John's body in Black Flag. Galena killed the leader, but he was revived with the last of the Shroud of Eden's power. The Assassins then stole all the data, and the Templars responded by reforming their Sigma team with one of their members. And then they all went to Montreal to deal with the retaliation of the Assassins in the Instruments of the Free Will. During the events of Unity, the Assassins managed to get one of their new initiates to relive Arno Dorian's memories and find out that the Apple of Eden had been in Saint Denis and had been sent to Egypt. The Assassins were busy trying to get the sage, Thomas Germain's corpse, before the Templars could, but gave up on researching it after seeing Abstergo wouldn't be able to recover a DNA sample. While these discoveries were being made, Juno attacked Abstergo's server with a virus that she implanted in Shay Cormac's memories. These triggered when one of the employees relived his memories. But even knowing this, the employee was forced to continue reliving Shay Cormac's memories. Juhani recorded the footage of Shay's memories and then used it to scare the Assassins into moving locations. He tracked the Initiate's movements and used the Templars' own Initiate contacts to track down the Assassin locations. By September 2015, Abstergo found a new Shroud of Eden through Arbaz Mir's son, Jayadip, while the Assassins were using the memories of Evie and Jacob Fry to beat them to it. They both found it at the same time, resulting in Rebecca being shot, but the Templar Isabella Ardent and much of the Sigma team being killed. The Templars ended up with the Shroud, but the Assassins managed to discover that Violet was an instrument of the First Will, and she planned to use the Shroud for Juno. But the Initiate's information had proved useful for so long that the high amount of security breaches ultimately ended the Assassins' relationship with them. This brings us to yet another comic book series that we've covered on the channel, which follows Charlotte de la Cruz. It's one of the final stories leading into Origins in the new era of Assassin's Creed. This is the Assassin's Creed Uprising book, and we're going to give you a very short synopsis of it, as it's a rather long series. In 2015, Charlotte de la Cruz would be recruited, hoping to verify whether or not one of their own assassins was a traitor. Not only would Charlotte accomplish this, but she would show that she was a natural in accessing the memories of her ancestors. She helped in verifying the betrayal of the assassins, speaking to the Isu Consus in the process. This would eventually lead her to tracking down Orido in the following years, discovering that her own grandmother is the one that actually runs the group. They'd get the information they needed on Koh-i-Noor and about the Resurrection Day, Juno's planned rebirth using the Phoenix Project, putting forth a plan to stop her by 2018. The Isu would then be resurrected, but Charlotte managed to use the piece of Eden against her. In the aftermath of their assault on the instruments of the First Will, Charlotte would kill Juno, and in an unexpected turn of events, Elijah, a sage recruited by the cult, would turn out to be none other than Desmond Miles' illegitimate son. He turned on Juno, and he helped Charlotte in the fight. In the building's collapse, however, Charlotte's fate was sealed, but the Koh-i-Noor stayed with Elijah. Orido would then seemingly work alongside the assassins. The instruments, failing to keep Juno alive, would just disband, and the assassins held a memorial for one of their most promising assassins. And that is the modern-day story of Assassin's Creed. At this point, it basically restarted in Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. But that storyline didn't go very far. They had a new main character named Layla who would track down things going on with the Isu, and eventually her brain would be downloaded into the device where seemingly Desmond currently lives. That story is currently ongoing, so I didn't really want to dive too much into it, plus not a lot ultimately happened with Layla overall. And now it seems like Ubisoft is going to be moving in a different direction, as current leaks seem to state that we are farther in the future and looking back on the past of the battle that happened in the modern day. We're also getting a new live service game that is going to be the focus of the modern day, as they are claiming it'll be removed from all of the games moving forward and only be in the live service. So I felt this was a great time to give you guys this consolidated look at what actually happened. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we're going to be bringing you more gaming lore right here at Eligible Monster, so like and subscribe if you want to get more of it. Thank you.